HiggTalks. My name is Caroline Perryman, and I have Veronica Schnitsius here. She is the president of American Leather, and American Leather, combined with all your companies now, has generated over $300 million, or $320 million in revenue this past year, and y'all produce over 400 to 500 pieces of furniture a day.
Just in Dallas.
Okay,
Combined,
so there's
probably,
even more.
Yes, 800 or so. Yeah.
Wow. So Veronica, tell us a little bit about yourself, because I'd love to hear more.
Thank you. Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm kind of glad to be here today. Let me start from where I come from. I come from Colombia, Medellin, Colombia to be exact. I came to the U.S. 20 years ago. August 20th is going to be my 20th anniversary in the U.S. I went to engineering school in Colombia, and I got the opportunity to do an internship in Dallas, Texas. I guess my destiny was here. I came in, did my internship, and they offered me a job. So came back, and I have been here now 20 years. So that's kind of the beginning of everything.
Can you tell us a little bit more about your journey from Colombia to the United States, or to Canada? Was that where you started? I've heard that you came with 2 suitcases and $500. I'd love to hear more about how that was.
So I went to engineering school in Colombia, and the school that I went to, you have to be bilingual to graduate. So you can have all your classes and your thesis, but if you don't speak a second language, you cannot become an engineer. So it makes sense to learn English, right? So my parents sent me to Victoria, Canada, which is in the West Coast. So I went to UVic, it's the University of Victoria. I studied English there. And when I was there, I got the opportunity to come and do my internship in Dallas. It was a company called the Leather Center. It's another furniture company. It was owned by a guy from Colombia that had this program with the school to bring interns every 6 months. So I came as a manufacturing engineer, did a project, and when I finished, they offered me a job. But I had to go back home, graduate. So I was in Colombia for like a year and a half. While I was there, I started working for KPMG as a consultant. I was in love. I thought life was great. Colombia was great. But, growing up in Colombia, and especially in Medellin, in the 80s, there were some situations that were not as pleasant. Unfortunately, we have the Medellin cartel, Pablo Escobar, all that crazy stuff. Things got better in the 90s, but still the country was not necessarily the greatest place. And when I went back to Colombia to graduate and was in love, I thought, my parents sat me down and they said, we understand you think you're in love. You're only 22 years old. You're going to the U.S., pretty much. So at that time, I kind of thought, well, maybe that's the right thing. So I thought I was going to come here for 5 years, do my master's, and go back. And 20 years later, I'm here, right? But I came and I started working with this company as an industrial engineer. I was making $28,000 a year, and I thought I was a millionaire coming from Colombia, right? It was awesome. You kind of learn to appreciate every little thing, learn a lot on that job. And after 8 months, they went Chapter 7. So literally, we're working on Friday, come on Monday, the doors are locked, everybody's out. So as an immigrant, when you come to the U.S. to work, I had what is called an H-1 visa. Mm-hmm. So you have 1 month to either find another job or you have to go back to your country. And I was lucky enough that somebody introduced me to Bob Duncan, the founder of American Leather. And 2 weeks later, I had a job. Transferred my visa, got all that stuff. And I have been here actually tomorrow it's 19 years.
Wow.
At the beginning, I was like, I still wanted to do my MBA and go. And I started going to school at night at the community college and working during the day. Then I transferred to UTA, graduated from my MBA, and I guess the rest is history.
That's amazing. So how did you decide to start going for your MBA while you were an engineer here at American Leather?
Yeah, so I'll tell you a funny story. So I started as an engineer, right? So a lot of the stuff that I had to do was like set up production lines or change the layout or something like that. And I reported to, at that point, who was the engineering manager. And I was doing a project for production, and the maintenance group was very hard to work with. Mm. And even though I gave them direction, they wouldn't be listening too much to me at that point. So I was so upset, like crying. And I went to the guy that was a production manager. His name is George Kinninger. And he's like German background, 6'5", 350. He's huge, right? And I go to his office, and I was 22, tiny, right? And he looked at me and he said, I want you to leave the nice lady home tomorrow and bring the bee here. Can you do that? And I was like, okay. And that was it. And the next day I said, this is what you guys have to do. And they did it. 2 weeks later, I went to report directly to the production manager. And that's kind of how I started building a relationship with him. And after 6 months of working with him, he goes, if you want to keep growing, you have to get your MBA.
That's amazing. And I also, one thing I read was that there was a personality test too that was involved that
you
was just
you
wrong.
did your homework. Yes. So when I was interviewing for American Leather, the founder, his name is Bob Duncan. So you have to do this personality test. And apparently I tested so wrong to what their job was that is like an applying for a sales job and an engineer. Usually those two things don't go together, right? And he, for whatever reason, he felt the test was wrong, and that was the last time that they did the test to any employees.
That's so fun. So do you think maybe the test was more geared towards, I mean, at least for you, maybe more leadership stuff, and it was just like
the test pretty much said that I wasn't good on details as an engineer, right? That's what the test said. And they made me take it in Spanish. They thought maybe it was a language barrier, and I failed equally as much in the Spanish one as I did on the English one. But for whatever reason, Bob felt, no, this doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
And he took a chance on me, and I'm here today, right? So it was a weird thing. We actually got to meet the guy that did the test, and Bob was like, she's the reason we don't work with you anymore. So
and you're sitting
fun.
in the room like, oh. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry about that.
We still today, we never had done that kind of personal. We use other stuff like predictive index and other stuff, but never use that test.
Yeah, we've used different. I had to take a bunch of personality tests for Higginbotham, but that's another
bet.
story. I have no idea what my results were, but they hired me. So
That's good.
Yes.
Whatever they were looking for, you passed.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly. Okay, also, I did some research, and it said that Faith brought you to Dallas for your internship. Can you tell me a little more about that?
Yeah, so I do believe that things happen for a reason, right? And what was interesting is that when I was going to Canada, I never planned to come to Dallas, right? And my ticket was Medellin, Miami, Dallas, Vancouver. And when I got the opportunity, I always felt like, why would I stop in Dallas of any city to go to Canada, right? Could have gone, I don't know, through Mexico to Canada, you know what I mean? Instead of going east to go, west. And that was it. And when I got this opportunity, it felt right from the beginning. The only thing that was interesting to me is I was learning English in Canada, right? And then I come from Vancouver, Victoria, to Dallas. I could not understand a word people said. Just the English in Canada is so different. It's more like British English. And here, I remember calling my mom that night and I said, Mom, you wasted all this money. I don't understand a word they said. And it's just like getting used to it. And I think like obviously the Hispanic influence in Texas, being bilingual has been a great tool for me to relate to the employees. Yeah, so I think it was faith, it was destiny. I do believe things happen for a reason. And I think this was the place for me to be. I met my husband, my daughter is from Dallas, so this is home now. It's going to be almost the same amount of time in my life in Dallas versus where I grew up.
That's so good. So thank goodness for the DFW airport thing.
Yes,
that we have you here.
Yes,
I'm so thankful.
You. Yes.
Sorry, our accents are hard
it was a little different. Yes.
Yes. So back to your leadership role. When were you starting? That was around because you moved here at 22, or you started in Dallas at 22?
I moved here when I was 22.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you started in leadership really soon after that. So were you like 23, 24?
23.
Wow.
Yeah. So basically, I started as an engineer. And like I told you, because of the maintenance challenge that I had, the 2 weeks later, he says, well, they don't want to listen to you. Now you're their boss. So interesting enough, I ended up, my first group that I really managed was the maintenance guys. There were 4 guys, and it was interesting, right? This little Colombian moment telling them what to do, and I really didn't know anything about maintenance, right? But that was my first journey, and when I was doing that, there was a big challenge on the cutting department, so they asked me if I could try that. So I did it, and I went from 4 people to maybe, at that time, maybe 35, 2 shifts. So that was very fun. I think I still, out of the 35, probably at least 10 employees are still here.
Wow,
with
that's
us.
amazing.
So yeah, people that, honestly, we have a tremendous workforce and the tenure is great. I always tell people, our biggest assets are the employees, right? We can buy anybody can buy, borrow money and buy anything, but people, and they care for the business, you can't, right? Like you can pay people a lot of money and they will work for you, but if their heart is not there, it won't work long term, right? So I think making sure the employees are taken care of is huge. And that first group really taught me a lot of stuff, and even cultures, learning what motivated and what was important to them. Sometimes they just wanted to be listened to and be part of it. And in a lot of companies, it's like a machine or like a number. And they have the same challenge you and I have. They have relationships, they have kids, they have dogs, they have bills to pay, right? So it's just making sure that we understand like where we are, right? And the more they understand where the company is going, the less kind of worries they're going to have about the future, right? Because everybody worries, how am I going to pay my bills, right? Or how am I going to do whatever I have to do? So that really was my first kind of journey into understanding that part about people and because it's about that, right? Like you can be the smartest engineer, you can be whatever, but if the employees don't want to work with you, it won't work.
Yeah. So that was one of my questions I was about to ask was, how did you get them to work with you as a 23-year-old woman? Is the secret really just getting to know people and them getting to know you? And how did you get to know them? Because I'm sure there was, a guard up for them seeing, oh, she's this tiny woman and young woman. Because I'll even go into meetings and they're like, oh, I thought you were, like, if I had gray hair, maybe it helps them. Or if I bring an older man, it always helps. How did you get them to listen to you to build that bond?
I think I had to listen to them first.
Yeah.
So, what was interesting, and I think I actually was pretty lucky because the manager that was there before was not very nice. So I think by me not being mean, that was like, wow, that's awesome, right? So we started doing things like we had like birthday celebrations, or every time that we accomplished something, like we brought food, like cakes, like I was on the floor with them and I learned the job. Don't ask me how to sew a sofa, but I always says that I'm dangerous enough to ask the question. So if I don't understand what they're doing, how can I ask them to do more, right? So I think the first thing was like listening to them, understanding their job, understanding their challenges, and kind of removing obstacles, right? I think as a manager, no matter what kind of manager you are, how high you have, on that pyramid, whatever you want to call it, right? Is you are removing obstacles for people. The machine doesn't work. The maintenance guy doesn't come on time, and not getting paid enough, or incentives and systems. So you kind of try to remove obstacle and create things that they feel, if I do this, I'm gonna get this. Because let's be honest, people come to a job not because it's a nonprofit and I'm gonna save kids and stuff like that. They come here because they need some type of income, right?
Yeah.
And I always tell the employees, hey, we're paying you, right? That's a done deal. Let's make it fun, because you can get paid, especially today, everywhere. Everybody's looking for employees everywhere. So what is it that is going to make us different? Because money can take you so far, right? And then after that, what? Is fulfillment, is enjoyment, is the working conditions, is your peers, so all those things kind of add up, little by little. So that's what we focus a lot of, like in wellness, right? So for me personally, if I don't feel good about myself, I'm not going to be good with you or anybody, right? Like, so a lot of people, like I remember when I came to the US, I love to work out, do different things, and people's like, oh, why do you work out? You're already married. I was like, I don't work out for my husband. I don't really care what he thinks about my workout. I do it for me, right? If I'm not happy with myself, I cannot make anybody else happy, right? And that's the same thing with employees. I want them to feel good. And it's not about like having a 6-pack or like being like super hot. It's not about that. It's about feeling good with yourself, whatever that means. I don't care what you feel, is whatever makes you happy. Right?
Exactly.
So that's, I think, important for us.
Oh my gosh. Okay. There's so many things to unpack on that. You talk about the wellness and your fitness stuff. I read that you you do triathlons.
Right.
How do you balance being the president of a massive company and also have time to stay fit and also compete in triathlons?
I don't think that I could do my job if I didn't have that outlet. I always worked out. I played volleyball in high school. This is something my whole life, right? But in 2009, I started kind of hanging out with a new group of friends, and they were all athletes, right? And I think that was a pivotal moment of my life. And at that moment in my career, I was working all the time. I was single. I thought that the only thing that I could do was work. And I really kind of have left my fitness on the side. And I went out for a run, and my heart rate got to like 200, you know what I mean? And I thought, oh my God, I could never be in this shape ever in my life again. And this group of friends, they were all triathletes, and they're like, oh, let's do a triathlon. I'm like, sure. I didn't even know what that meant, honestly. And I remember jumping in that water, and I thought I was a good swimmer growing up. I thought I was going to die. Like, I got so much anxiety. So after that, when I ended up finishing but muscle into it, I said, I love this, right? So I started running. So I became more a marathoner. So I did my first marathon in 2010, Chicago, which was an incredible experience. Met my best friend through that, also a runner, right? And it was like our outlet 3 times a week, between 5 to 20 miles, in a run. You have a lot of time to talk to somebody when you run for 20 miles. So we developed this great friendship. I actually met my husband through running. He has never run again after we met, but he went training for a half marathon. He's
like, I'm married, I'm done.
And yeah, exactly. He hasn't run since then. But running has brought a lot of great friendships, and it's kind of like the space. Honestly, people ask me, because my husband doesn't do any of this, and they ask me, why doesn't he? Like, if he wants to, that's great, but that's kind of like my space. So in the mornings, I usually get up at 4:30. Like this morning, I get up, I run, or I go to the gym to swim or whatever, but it's kind of like my own outlet. And I'm very competitive, which is good and sometimes not great, especially when you pass it out to the next generation, which my daughter is super competitive. And the beautiful thing about triathlon is that you're competing with yourself, right? Like, you're in an age group, and you want to win your age group, but it's more about every time my times are better, I feel better, I got a little faster, I got a little stronger. So it has been a journey now. My first big triathlon, I did it in 2013. So now, I guess 8 years into it, and I try to do 1 or 2 big ones a year. When I call big ones, so I'm excited about this. My husband is an incredible supporter. I couldn't do it without him. Having, a baby. Hannah was 11 months when I did my first half Ironman. So she was a little tiny baby, and he just has that stroller all over those races. I joke with him, and it's going to sound bad. But I joke with him that I don't know that I would be that kind to him if he did that stuff. I said, look, pulling a baby through a triathlon for 5 hours, I don't know that that's something that I would love to do for you. And believe me, we travel throughout the country with the baby and him. We joke that he's the CEO of the team, and Hannah's the cheerleader. And honestly, Hannah, that's all she has seen, right? So triathlon is not as common, right? Sport as other sports, but Hannah thinks that everybody does triathlon, right? Because that's all she has seen. Actually, she did her second one last Sunday, and watching her race and like the laser focus mentality and this competitive edge to her. And as a mom, I try to play I don't really care that much, because the more I push her, the more she's probably gonna push away. Mm-hmm. As you know, probably you did that to your own mother. But it was just such an incredible feeling, seeing her do something that I love so much. I don't think that's gonna be her sane, passionate side like it is for me, because she loves tumbling. That's her love. But it doesn't matter to me. It's just seeing that competitiveness. And I think sports, for kids, for adults, is the discipline, right? It's the consistency, it's the discipline, and it teaches you that really strong mindset, because triathlon is a lot of pain. Mm-hmm. So you learn how to endure the pain through a long time, and it's not about the pain, right? That sounds bad, but it's more about that discipline and being able to go through stuff and kind of finish. Exactly right. Yeah.
So your 9-year-old does triathlons?
Yes.
She's
cool.
Need to work hard.
God. She's a little rock star.
Holy moly.
Yeah. And she's very athletic. She's gifted, but she also I joke with her that lack of confidence is not going to be her problem, is the other one. So trying to kind of get her a little humble, where she just hey, I have to work hard to get things in life, and not everything is easy.
Gosh, wow. Mm-hmm. I thought that's what you said, and I was just my mind is blown. It's still blown. Wow. Okay, so you wake up at 4:30. How many times do you push snooze? Do you push snooze at all? Or do you get out of bed each time?
I get up each time. I would say every once in a while, but I honestly like got into this rhythm, so I just cannot sleep past that time, so I just get up. It's not like I go to bed also very early, 9 o'clock. I'm very friendly in the morning. After 9, not so much. And I have never been like, I don't drink hardly at all. Like I have a glass of wine, but I've never been a drinker, a partier. So it's me, right? Like it's not like I want to be cool like doing this. It's just who I am, right? Like it's not hard because it's like who I have been my whole life.
Wow. Okay. That's amazing. I need to just get up when my alarm goes off and probably get up earlier.
Once you get into that rhythm, I promise you, it becomes like habit. Now, and Hannah doesn't sleep past 6:30 anyway too. So it's not like, oh, let's stay in bed, because she still gets up every morning. So
I'm also impressed that you can have a conversation with someone while running. I cannot even do that.
It takes practice, but you can, I promise.
It's incredible. Okay, so following up on your focus on employees and your wellness that you've initiated, can you tell me a little bit more about your new wellness initiative and wellness center that y'all put in place?
Yeah. So, for us, fitness has been important, right? And this journey probably started, I would say, over 12 years ago. So the HR person said, hey, we need to do something with employees. We're seeing, a lot of high blood pressure, things like that. Why don't we start a Biggest Loser? And I said, okay, how much money do we need? Like $5,000, whatever that was. And I said, okay. So I went to the CEO at that time, Bob, and I said, well, we need $5,000 because we need to do this awards and all this stuff. And he goes, what's the ROI, right? Like everybody asks that question every time. And I was like, well, I don't know, but I think it makes sense. I go to HR and he goes, what did they say? I said, oh, they say yes. And he goes, okay. So I said, ask for forgiveness, not for permission sometimes. So we were in a board meeting, actually on this room that we're sitting here, and people was running around the building. And he's like, oh my God, there's a fire. Like people is running. And I was like, well, not really a fire. People is training. What do you mean people is training? Well, remember we talked about this? He wasn't necessarily pleased at that moment, but once we saw there's an employee, particularly, she lost 70 pounds, 70.
And
right?
how long was the?
I think it was 6 to 8 weeks. Wow. And it was just, she took this too hard. This woman, her name is Maria, took this too hard. And when Bob saw her, and believe me, fitness and this wellness thing is not just about the employees. The waves that this have is crazy. It's the kids, it's the grandparents, whoever is on that household. And when you see somebody that has been in some type of overweight condition for a long time, and all of a sudden they can get to a way where they feel better, they skip less days at work, they are more efficient, they're more active, it's a win-win for everybody, right? So in 2012, 13, we built a wellness center here in the building. And we have a personal trainer that comes every day for an hour or two. It's free for the employees. Now with COVID, right? A little challenging to use the facilities just because we have to be careful. So they do it on the parking lot. So we call it a boot camp. So it's Monday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. They do a boot camp. And the transformation of these employees has been incredible. We also have done maybe like 3 or 4 5Ks. So we ran a 5K, and employees for free, and the families too. The last one we did, I think it was in 19, right, pre-COVID, we have 800 people show up.
Oh my goodness.
We hired a company here in Dallas that does races. So we hired them, we went to a park. And before, up until this year, whoever ran faster than me would get an iPad. But I'm getting older and they're getting faster, so not a great combination. So we started with 3 maybe the first year. Last time it was like 13. So I said the budget is getting too big. We have to think about another goal. So, but it's fun, right? Like the employees a lot of times just want to beat me, right? And then you see them, running in the parking lot, doing stuff. We have a guy in Chipin. He just didn't lose the weight. He just got into this world, and he's lifting, and he's smiling more. It's just incredible for some people, that physical transformation, what they can do for their mind.
Absolutely. It's such a it's when people say lifestyle change, but it really is once you get involved, and that's amazing that y'all did that for your employees.
Yeah.
Wow. So in regards to the Biggest Loser, how much weight did you guys lose?
I think now we are, like I said, over 10 years, we joke that we have done over 2 whales. So, like over 4,000 pounds of weight, because we have done a Biggest Loser once or twice a year. And like I said, we do speedometers, how many steps. We have done all kinds of stuff. We hired a company here in Dallas that does wellness stuff, so they kind of give us nutrition seminars because it's bigger than the workouts, right? They say 80% comes through the mouth, right? So you can work out a lot, but if you don't eat the right stuff, and what's interesting is this culture here, particularly in Dallas and also in North Carolina. Dallas is mainly Hispanic, right? Mainly from Mexico. The diet is not necessarily the healthiest diet in general, right? Tortillas and a lot of like grease and that kind of stuff, which is delicious, right?
Yes.
But for the long term, maybe not the greatest thing to eat, right? So what we're trying to do is teach the employees that you don't have to have a lot of money to eat healthier. It's the same ingredients, maybe in a different way. It's also portion control, right? Instead of having 5 tortillas, maybe I have 3 tortillas, maybe start with 4 and then I go to 2, whatever, right? Or maybe the last taco is without a tortilla, right? It's just little changes. And when they start seeing that, oh, I don't have to go and eat like chicken breast and carrots, right? Yeah. I can still eat the things that I'm comfortable with, but it's how the relationship with food, right? Because a lot of people has this crazy relationship with food, that food is like that outlet for sadness or stress or things like that, right? So maybe instead of using that, maybe the run or the walk or the weights or whatever. And also you don't have to have a gym membership to be fit, right? Like we do it today at the parking lot and some employees are loving it, right? You just need maybe a bands that cost $20 in Amazon. Obviously, if you can find it today because of COVID, but it's just simple things that they can use to kind of feel better about themselves.
That's amazing. And here's an insurance question, but does your benefits broker ever come help in regards to like helping you guys initiate wellness programs? Do they get you guys connected and bring in different seminars and stuff too, or is that more outsourced to this Dallas company?
It's more outsourced to the Dallas company. I know we get like an allowance to do more wellness stuff. So we take a budget and we allocate it by company depending on the needs. So they help that way, but not doing it themselves. I think that unfortunately last year with COVID, things are kind of a little bit on the air and what do we need to do, and the population is changing. So we're trying to look at employees more like how can we do more preventive stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a huge part of the population that is not necessarily on insulin, for example, but they are at a high risk to be, right?
Yeah.
So how do you identify those employees and kind of get to them earlier, right?
Yeah.
That's the key. Somebody hasn't developed diabetes, but they're about to, or like high blood pressure. How can you take that population and start shifting their habits so they don't go to that dangerous quadrant, what I call, right? So it's thinking about that again, and it's food, it's stress, it's sleep, it's exercise, right? It's all of that.
Yeah.
So and people sometimes think that when you start a journey, you have to go to the gym every day. You don't. I mean, it's the same thing when you run a marathon. People think like, how am I going to run a marathon? Well, you start with 1 mile, right? Or half a mile.
Yeah.
And then that builds in, but it takes time. And I think you asked me this earlier, is that mental toughness, right? Because it's not an easy thing. And people today, I call it the Amazon effect. Now, 2 hours, I got it tomorrow. And some things don't happen like that. And you just have to be committed to that journey and enjoy the journey, right? Like my daughter is very competitive, as I told you, and she goes, Mommy, did you get a trophy? So in triathlon, if you get the trophy, it means you won your age group, right? Everybody gets a medal. So she's like, the medal doesn't really mean anything, right? Which, I wouldn't argue with her that much on that point, right? But it's about competing. But I always said it's not about the trophy, it's that journey. For me, I worked really hard to get to the starting line and to get through that finish line. So the race being 5 hours, 12 hours, 15 hours is not what it is about. It's the 6-8 months that you put your life on a different path to get to that time, right? So, and it's the same thing with the employees, is how do we help them through learn that if they start now with little things, they don't have to go to that unhealthy side and be there for their families, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so one more question before we go Amazon effect. I want to go to that too. But what all do you know, like what all is your broker doing to help you guys in regards to wellness? I know they're there for your at least employee benefits program and open enrollment, but is there anything else that they're contributing for?
So like, for example, we're looking a lot into like the population, what's happening, what are the biggest causes, like is it high blood pressure, is it, what is it, what are the causes, right? And what can we do with that population to make sure that we prevent that? So in the last, I would say, year, we're looking more into that data. We have kind of like a doctor that we consult with, even through COVID, like what are the protocols? How do we talk? I think my perspective is in the next year, mental health is going to become a bigger issue. I think it is today, but I don't think we have seen all the effects of COVID yet. Like the waves are starting to come. So that's something that I would like to talk to them. What can we do? Like one thing is high blood pressure, but you don't know when somebody is going through depression a lot of the times. You know what I mean? You don't know what people is struggling, what demons they're fighting inside, right? Like, and I think exercise can be a great outlet for that. Or other stuff, helping them get more sleep, right? Because they cannot sleep because they're worried all the time. So I would love to think more about mental health more than anything right now. Again, no, the high blood pressure still not there because people home ate a lot. And, you know, it's interesting because through COVID, you saw the ones that got really fit and they got the ones that went the other way.
I went the other way. I'm trying to get back to the really fit.
Doesn't look like you did, but okay.
I'm on my journey.
You're in your journey. Yeah, you're good.
Yes. But yes, Amazon effect. I want to go back to that. So the reason that y'all are and have been so popular is how quickly y'all turn around furniture. And with Amazon, has that changed at all, or has that made y'all more competitive to get stuff out? What difference has kind of the most recent 5 years of Amazon kind of expanding, what has that done with American Leather?
Yeah, it definitely has been a huge competitive advantage. That speed to market is huge, right? So for us, continuing to work on ways to be more efficient is key, right? Everybody can buy a sofa from here, from Asia, from whatever, right? Even within the United States, there are plenty of options. But the fact that you can get it how you want it faster is huge, right? And that's where that premium becomes important, right? People is willing to pay more if they get what they want faster. Unfortunately, in COVID times, that has happened to prove even more important, but more challenging, right? So we still are one of the fastest, but we're like way slower than we were, you know, I mean, a year and a half ago. Just supply chain backlogs, as you probably have read and heard and know by personal experience, furniture has exploded, right? And people is home, they don't have an office to go to, they have more time, they're not going on vacation. So a lot of that disposable income for my vacation, I want to renovate my house. You know, I told you earlier, my water heater blew up on Sunday. And yesterday we couldn't find a water heater in the city of Dallas. So calling people to get a water heater. I said to my husband, I don't care what water heater we get, one water heater, right? But it's things like that before you took it like for granted and now they're not, right? Yeah. But it also, I think that this pandemic, as hard as things have been, had made the company more agile and better prepared for whatever normal is going to be in the future. Yeah. Like we got stronger, we got leaner and meaner, you know?
I love that. I do think that the quality of y'all's stuff is so. I was sitting in the chair over there when I was waiting for Chris. It was the middle chair, and I think she called it the Comfort Air.
Yes. Yeah.
So I don't think I could get that on Amazon.
Cannot.
So right. I think there's still so much value to you guys and everything, all the furniture that you guys do. But obviously there's the time aspect. But how quickly are y'all creating, let's say, like a sofa or a chair now?
Well, so the cycle time in the factory is 3.5 days. It's three and a half days. So it goes pretty quickly. The challenge that we have is the backlog, right? And also labor has been very difficult, you know what I mean, with everything that is happening, benefits, you know, people is also afraid. Some people are still afraid of COVID. We should respect it, but I think we know more now, you know what I mean, to be careful, right? And also the vaccines, that I think that especially in this country, if you don't have a vaccine, for the most part, it's because you don't want to, right? Because availability is everywhere, right? So I think that the effects of the vaccine, I'm not gonna get into that, everybody, it's a personal choice, but science has told us that the possibility of catastrophic damages with the vaccine is less, right? We'll see in a year what that says, and everybody's going to argue a different side. And, you know, I mean, I'm not an expert, I'm not a scientist, but I think now we're at a point that we feel really comfortable having people here. We know very strict protocols. We have been blessed on the sense that we haven't lost as many employees. We lost 2 employees, which, you know, I mean, still really sad, but it unfortunately, you know, on the masses, it's just something that the world wasn't prepared for, and we all are learning about it. And I think today our numbers are way down, even exposure. You know, I mean, it's more about, oh, my husband had it, so I have to stay home. We know more about it. We know how to talk about it. We know how to isolate. So I hope that the labor situation changes and we can increase capacity. Believe me, today, if we could, we would hire 50 people tomorrow.
Yeah.
We just don't have people even applying for the jobs today.
Wow.
It's sad. And it's here in Dallas and it's as it is in North Carolina.
Wow.
Very difficult.
That's interesting. I do know that y'all take such good care of your employees, and not just the employees, but their families too. I read that you inspired a female employee here to go to college, and you've also set up a college scholarship fund for the employees' families. Can you tell me a little more about that?
Yeah, so we discussed, I think wellness and education are huge, right? Like I believe education can change people's lives, and it's not about getting a degree, right? Anything, right? Like you want to be a plumber, do a trade. So a lot of the employees here are first generation from whatever country they come from, right? So they migrated from that country, so their kids are going to be the first generation Americans, right? And when you live in a household that this is all you see, you think that's the path you have to have, and it is a beautiful path if you want to do that. But we also want to show this generation that they have options, right? And a lot of the times education sadly becomes about resources, right? Like, can I pay for it or not? So the founder decided to create this fund, and it has been so amazing to see employees. We have an employee that has been with us, I think, over 25 years now, and his kid graduated from UT last year. He didn't even finish high school. So when you think about the parents not even finishing high school and the kids going to UT, you know, UT is an amazing school, right? Scholarships, and they go to UNT, they go to whatever, right? We have an employee, I think the daughter got a scholarship for Georgia Tech. Great, you know, it's cool. So it's just like that exposure. And, you know, as a female, even with the sewers, you know, you don't know what kind of upbringing they had, but maybe the parents didn't know any better either. So they're like, oh, you have to have a job in a factory because that's the only way to kind of create and support your family. And when they see females doing other stuff, they're like, oh, this is not the only path. This is another path that I can choose to do. And it's about optionality, right? It's not about, I think that employees here can have a really good living if this is what they want to do. But I would like for more people to know, hey, this is a path, and this is a great path, but I also can have that other path. So if the kids have that desire to do it, we want to support that.
That's amazing. And how many families or employees are first generation in the United States?
Employees, you know, I think it's changing more and more. Right now, it's first generation American in the factory. I don't know the exact number, but my guess, just by looking at the workforce, it's less than 5%.
Okay. With the employees that y'all have that are first generation, I know that y'all have some really cool different flags in your cafeteria. That's my favorite thing I've read. What does that mean to you? What does that mean to the employees of the representation from their
yeah, it means that we're honoring where they came from, right? Just so to me, you know, like people ask me why diversity is important, and when they ask me that, I'm like, I don't understand the question, in the sense that, well, wouldn't it be? Yeah. Like, it's like, I don't ask you if you took a shower, like people takes a shower, right? So for us, like that diversity of backgrounds has made this company so much better, and we have to celebrate that. You know, I'm Colombian, I have an American passport and a Colombian passport, but my heritage is Colombian, and I want my daughter to know that. I'm very proud of that. So as an immigrant, that's important to me, and I know it's important to everybody else, right? They want to know, hey, I came from Vietnam, I came from China, I came from El Salvador, whatever, right? So I want to honor that background. So it just also becomes like a fun thing when the countries play, and so you know where people is from, and it just also becomes like a fun thing for us to
really
celebrate.
Cool.
Yes,
because I read somewhere that you started bonding with a lot of your male coworkers by talking about soccer.
Right.
I'm the only female producer in the Dallas office, so I talk a lot about football, and I'm joining their fantasy football team, and I learned how to do that. But
so you know, I have more championships in fantasy football than anybody in this company.
How
11
many?
years, 4 titles.
Holy
I joke,
moly.
it's fun because I'm the only woman that plays, and I play because they all want to beat me, right? So, and it's fun. And the second time I won it, I was pregnant, and I was like, you guys pathetic white male being beat by a Hispanic woman. But it's like soccer. I relate soccer more to the employees in the factory, and the office is more about football. I love football now. I love the Dallas Cowboys.
It's hard not to.
I'm a true fan because
Yeah.
I love them when they have been not great. So I never saw them at their glory, right? So, but I love football in general. When you do fantasy, you love just the player. I really don't care who they play. Just want that player to get the points. but yeah, it's just like, but I love sports, right? Like, so football or, baseball, it's not as fun to me. Like, it's fun, but unless you go to the World Series, it's more fun, I guess. But definitely football, hockey, anything with some type of excitement, it's fun. And again, it's that competitive side too. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it helps us as women
Right.
excel, especially because I feel like manufacturing is also pretty male dominated.
Yes.
How would you, if you, a female trying
Right.
to figure out how to bond with your coworkers, if you're not a big sports person, do they need to just learn it? Or
No, I don't think so. I think you have to be real, right?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't bond with soccer because I really love it, right?
Yeah.
So it was really easy, but you have to find whatever that is that gives that connection, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even between two women, right? Like, you were talking about your dog, right? Like, I don't have a dog, but you were talking about, swimming. Like, what can we find that we can relate to and explore that
Mm-hmm.
more, right? And if you don't like sports, I think there's a lot of stuff that, men and, you talk about politics can be a little bit of a sensitive subject because there are differences of opinion, but what else is out there that can be kids, right? Hobbies, right? Photography. What else can you talk to that specific group that they're interested in?
That's amazing. I know we've talked a little bit about Bob Duncan, and I think one thing that I've heard in another podcast was that he never saw you as a woman or a man. He just saw you for who you were and your work ethic, and your work. How can more leaders be like that, be like a Bob Duncan who doesn't see gender and also sees women as equal?
That's a really good question. I think it just has to start by having more females or more anything, really, more diversity, right? Races. Like, it's so sad where it's not that you don't want to hire employees that are female or African Americans or gay or whatever, right? Is that people is afraid of, I cannot apply for that job. I'm not enough. And when people ask me that, it's like, don't be afraid.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's the worst you can happen? You already have it.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's going to get any worse, right? I was incredibly blessed because my mother never led me to believe I couldn't do anything. And I didn't realize that until very recently. Like, that's what she did. I said, Mom, I just want to climb this mountain. Okay. Now I think like that's a little crazy, right? But because she never led me to believe that I was different than my brother. We're only 18 months apart. I'm older and the oldest, but we were the same. And my eyes on my mother. And then when I came here, Bob did the same. And I think as leaders, it's like, it's hard not to look at somebody's skin, but it's about, and even as a woman, people say, hire more women. I said, what about I hire more talented people? Mm-hmm. It's not, I would love for them to be women, but I also want it to be white males that are really capable. It doesn't matter how you look like, right? And it's about that skill set, that work ethic. And when we start not talking about it as much, I think it's gonna change. Because what's happening to me, sadly, today is we're pushing this diversity and maybe putting people that is not talented enough just because of the color of the skin. And at the same time, they can be very talented and, they got there because they were African American. They got there because they were a woman. It was a woman, or they got there because whatever. And it makes a huge disservice to that person because they most likely deserve it.
Yeah.
But they're like, it happened to me. Oh yeah, Bob loves her as because she's a female, right? But I earned everything I got, right? And I'm very proud of that. And I want to do the same to everybody that works for me. And when we start talking about this in a different way, like, is this percentage, just even at school, right? Like, people get into college based on the color of the skin. I think that's so wrong, right? Like, how about the most talented person, right? I understand that there's some advantages in certain socioeconomic stuff. But if you take that money side, how do we look at kids and like who's the most capable for this specific spot, and not because they're Asian or they're Latin or this, right? It's about who has the best capabilities for what I'm looking for. So trying to, a lot of times it's even better not interviewing, seeing somebody. It's hard with the voice, you would know who it is, but how can I take all that stuff, kind of like American Idol, it sounds cheesy, or The Voice, you pick somebody just because of how they sound, not because how they look.
Absolutely. And what advice would you have for, other than just like, you don't have the job right now, go for it. What advice would you have for other women or people of diversity like out there?
So I would say, one, work harder than anybody else, right? Two, it just don't be afraid of new learnings, right? And it's just not go for the job, but continue to challenge yourself, get education, reading. It's not, you don't have to go to Harvard, Stanford, obviously all that is great, but what else can you do? There's a lot of free resources out there. Networking, right? Don't be afraid to go to a new thing for an association. You never know who you're gonna meet that's gonna push you to the next thing. So I just think being out there, being in your living room watching Netflix certainly is not gonna do it, right? It can be a cool series, but it doesn't mean you cannot watch Netflix, right? But just don't be afraid to take little steps, even at the gym. Sometimes you never know, the guy next to you, the woman next to you happens to be the ones around the company and they like you, right? Actually, my first job in Colombia, I got because the owner of the company, I was a waitress growing up in a pizza place, and I was his server one day, and when I got to the interview, he's like, I remember you. And I didn't remember him, but he did. And I was against the girl that was the top graduating on my class, the top graduate of my class. And I got the job. And I remember asking him when I was in the company, you know what I mean, it was in Colombia, and he said, I gave you the job because of how you treated me on that restaurant. At that time, I didn't know. So every little situation is your best chance to show up yourself. It doesn't have to be you show up to that interview so beautiful. No, you never know. The grocery store, being kind to somebody, like, why not? You never know who you're helping. And it also feels great when you help people. You know, people is like, why do you want to help? Because it feels awesome to yourself. You know what I mean? It's not just to the other person. So I think every little opportunity that you have as a human to show kindness and work hard and be passionate is maybe that opportunity that will take you to the next step.
What challenges have you had along the way? Were there any bumps and bruises that you've encountered?
Yeah, so obviously, you know, I mean, growing up, tons of challenges, but made me stronger. I think coming into this country as an immigrant, I have to tell you, growing in Colombia, I always saw the U.S. as this freedom, everybody is the same. I didn't even know there was like a Republican Party and a Democratic Party. I just thought people just vote for whoever, right? Those learnings about how this country run have been enlightenment for me. But yeah, like how people looks at you differently because of how you sound, having an accent can have a lot of advantages. Bob said, you sound smarter even when you're insulting somebody. I was like, well, that's not what I meant to say, but you know, having an accent can have a lot of advantages and disadvantages because they think, oh, you're Latin, you must be working in a factory, right? Like I remember going into shows with a male counterpart, and they wouldn't even look at me. And I would walk in a room and they're like, oh, are you the executive assistant for the owner or whatever? Many times, right? But instead of letting that put me down, it's like, let me show you why I'm here. I deserve to be here. You don't need to like own me to know that I'm here. I'm here because I work hard. And I think when you start getting detached from what other people think and do what you think is right, things can change.
I love that. And you have a daughter, so how do you make her feel like she can does she want to be an engineer? Does she know that you're running the company? And how does she feel about, like, how do you make her feel like she can do whatever she wants to do and be whomever she wants to be when she grows up?
Yeah, so I think showing her by example is huge, right? Showing her that I can balance being a mom, an executive, a triathlete, you know, a wife, a friend, you know, I show walking my talk, number one. Two is opening doors for her, right? I think as a parent, you just have to build this tool set and give it to your kids, and they need to learn how to use those tools when, right? I want to use the tools for her. I would love to, as a mom, to protect her, but I know that's wrong, right? So building those tools so she can see what's possible, right? Every time she's curious, I'm like, let's try. She has no fear, right? Which is great and also scary as a parent, but I want to climb that mountain. Okay, let's see. And if you fall and something happened, you learn, right? Sometimes she doesn't, but we'll do it again and we'll see what happens. So I think exposing her to things that will show her different things is another thing, removing obstacles, giving her tools, and exposing her to situations that she wouldn't be exposed unless I kind of make an effort to do it.
If I was like a new 22-year-old joining the workforce, what advice would you have for me?
I think one thing that is also important, maybe finding a mentor, somebody that can kind of reflect with you on that journey. You know, so being a woman, if you're a woman, or a man, it really doesn't matter. Having that mentorship, I think, can be really big. I think continue to invest on that leadership. I think as a human, you evolve, right? And you get put in different situations as you learn things. So being there to be open, to say, maybe I need to look at myself in the mirror and I need to change that. I think being open to hearing feedback and criticism is hard, right? Like, it sucks when somebody's like, well, you're not that great, but it's the truth, at least on the eyes of that person, right? And if you take that criticism and use it for your advantage, it can be powerful. It is painful, but being open to that feedback, right? Like, I can always get better. I can always get better, whatever better it is, right? I think that being aware of who you are and what you want to become is important, right? Because everybody has a perception of themselves that sometimes is bigger than what other people perceive, and it may be a reason for that. And how do you kind of connect those two things and say, hey, I'm good with this, or I really want to get better? And hearing that feedback, I think, is important. Peers, a boss, friends, because we all have blind sides, right? And we're like, oh, we're doing great, and all of a sudden, well, people really doesn't like you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So as most buyers of furniture are women, but as most like CEOs and presidents of furniture manufacturing companies are male, how has being a woman been an advantage, and why should there be more female leaders in manufacturing companies?
I think more than furniture is in manufacturing in general. I think women are really connected to people. I think that side, that family side, men tend to be more practical, is efficient. Women try to be a little softer and stereotyping, right? So all of things. I think the more women there are, the more diversity we're going to have. I think the employee benefits will improve. I think the working conditions may improve. So there's a little bit more balance there. And I think by having more leaders that are female, the diversity is going to grow regardless. Because even some people that has more diversity kind of background, they feel more comfortable with a woman than sometimes with a man. It just depends.
And what would you say is the biggest problem in business insurance right now?
Wow, what's the biggest? I think that it is so incredibly complicated. So even understanding what you're paying for, what that means, what includes, like, okay, if I get into an accident, what happened with my deductible? And going and you keep getting bills and bills, and it's scary. I'm paying, I think I'm good. All of a sudden, this complex system terrifies me, right? So how can we have more transparency? Hey, this is what I'm paying for. This is what I get, right? You're a business, make money. I'm good with that. But don't make it so complicated that you have to have 3 people quoting and really understanding what that means for a company, and to the employee level is hard.
Yeah. Absolutely. So mainly like communication, education, and transparency.
Education and transparency. They make it, this clause here means this. And like, the deductible now is double, and it's like in lame terms.
Why did it double?
Yes,
why is this happening?
What can I do to be healthier and benefit from that, right? And so the more we understand as, let's call it employees or business owners or whatever, what I'm paying for and what that means and how can I get better, I think the easier it is going to be. But the red tape and the amount of layers of complexities in insurance is crazy.
It's a lot. I learn every day, and I'm always taking continued education.
And you're like, this happened. Oh, that means that, right? Like, so it has to exist.
Yeah.
Insurance are so important, the health insurance, every insurance. But the time you have to use it, you're like, look at with the Texas freeze back in February. People still struggling today. They don't even know how to do the claims. And if they do, they get paid a fee when they thought they were fully covered. Oh, but you didn't read this clause. So almost you need an attorney to sign a contract, and it shouldn't be that complicated.
Yeah. How can people find you? How can people connect with you?
I think LinkedIn is probably the best one. I'm not great in like social media. I have an Instagram account, but I don't do much. You know, if somebody wants advice or mentorship, I would love to help anybody, right? LinkedIn, Veronica Schnitzia is my biggest thing. I always try to, respond to messages there. So I would go through LinkedIn.
How can people learn more about American Leather?
I think the best way to learn about American Leather is the website, AmericanLeather.com. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, so all the social media. On the website, you will find who we are, our products, how we ship, more about our culture. So that's where the main repository of information is. But if you just want to see beautiful furniture, Instagram is a great way.
And then also, if someone sees all this beautiful furniture, where can they purchase it?
So when they go on the website, they can find a dealer. So you just put your zip code, and it's going to show you as a consumer our best partners on that area.
How quickly could someone get one of those pieces of furniture?
Usually it's 3 weeks. Today with COVID, we're averaging 10 weeks.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Well, hopefully we can get back to
hopefully
where we are.
we can do it in 2022. We go back to normal lead time.
Veronica, thank you so much
My
for your
pleasure.
time. This has been wonderful for me, and thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. It was really fun.